It's been 8 months since they died. The pack thinks that's long enough. They're wrong. Grief doesn't follow schedules. It doesn't care about anyone's comfort or convenience. It sits in your chest like broken glass, and some days, the shards shift and cut you open all over again. The Stormveil compound's gathering hall-pressed in like a cage. Dozens of eager she-wolves filled the space, ambition thick in the air. They'd dressed for this, gowns that balanced submission and seduction, soft glances that disguised ruthless intent. This was a stage, and they were performers. I wore the same dress I'd worn to my mate's memorial. Black. Simple. A silent refusal to play. At the far end of the hall, on a raised platform, stood Alpha Ronan Stormveil, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, storm-gray eyes cutting through the crowd with cold, surgical precision. They said he felt nothing, that something vital in him had died the night his family burned. Then his gaze locked onto mine. "Do you have a mate?" he asked. I could have lied. Should have. But I was tired of pretending the wound didn't exist. "Not anymore," I whispered. The room froze. His body locked, every muscle coiled tight. Something cracked open behind his eyes. Not dismissal. Not dominance. Recognition. Understanding. And beneath it, rage. Not at me. For me. Explain. Now. Chapter 1. The Gathering. Selene Bright Moon, called Garrick Stonepaw, the Enforcer, a towering wolf with a weathered face etched in scars. A stunning she-wolf stepped forward, all grace and confidence. Ronan's eyes swept over her with the warmth of a winter storm. 10 seconds. A flick of dismissal. She retreated with barely concealed disappointment. Again. And again. One by one, they approached. One by one, they were rejected without a word. I counted the dismissals like a countdown to my own humiliation. I shouldn't have been here. My old pack insisted, couldn't have an unmated Omega making them look weak. Didn't matter that I'd begged. Didn't matter that the thought of standing before another alpha made me want to claw my own skin off. Then, Lyra Ashwyn. My name sliced through the air like a blade. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Then a sharp elbow nudged my ribs, impatient, unkind, and I stumbled forward on legs that barely held me. The crowd parted, and suddenly there was nothing between me and the platform but 30 feet of polished stone and my own ragged breathing. I walked. Because I had to. Storm-gray eyes met mine. Piercing. Like lightning before it strikes. "Do you have a mate?" he asked again. Not anymore. This time, the silence was suffocating. "He was murdered," I said, my voice breaking. 8 months ago. They made me watch. I forced the words out. I was pregnant. Ronan descended the steps with slow, predatory grace until he stood directly in front of me. Close enough that I had to tilt my chin up to meet his eyes. Who? Blackridge Pack. Something shifted in his expression, recognition of a nightmare he'd lived through too. His hand lifted my chin, gentle despite the power in it. "You will stay," he said, voice rough with barely leashed emotion. Not a request. A command. "Why?" I whispered. His thumb brushed my cheek, and something broke behind his storm-gray eyes. "Because," he said quietly, "I think you're the first person who might actually understand." Chapter 2. The Alpha's Study. The Alpha's private study was nothing like I expected. Where the gathering hall had been all cold stone and intimidating displays of power, this room felt almost lived in. Worn leather chairs faced a fireplace where flames crackled softly. Bookshelves lined 3 walls, packed with volumes that actually looked read rather than decorative. A large desk dominated one corner, its surface covered in maps and reports, evidence of the weight he carried. Ronan stood by the window, his back to me, silhouette stark against the fading daylight. Without the crowd, without the performance of alpha dominance, he seemed different. Still dangerous, that would never change, but somehow more real. More human beneath the wolf. "Sit," he said quietly, gesturing to one of the chairs by the fire. Not a command this time. An invitation. I sat, though my body remained tense, ready to flee even as part of me recognized the futility. If he wanted to hurt me, there was nowhere I could run that he wouldn't find me. But the violence I'd braced for didn't come. Instead, he moved to the other chair, lowering himself with a weariness that seemed to go bone deep. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The fire popped and hissed, filling the silence. They tell you to move on, he finally said, his voice rough. That grief has stages, timelines. That if you just give it enough time, one day you'll wake up and it won't hurt anymore. His laugh was bitter. They're wrong. You don't get over losing the people you love. You don't heal and return to who you were before. You just learn to carry it. The weight becomes familiar, and some days it's bearable, and some days it buries you all over again. My throat tightened. The pack gave me 3 weeks before they started with the concerned looks and gentle suggestions. Perhaps you should try to socialize more, Lyra. You can't let this define you, Lyra. He wouldn't want you to stop living. I wrapped my arms around myself. As if they had any idea what he would have wanted. As if they knew what it felt like to have your entire future ripped away in one night. Ronan's jaw clenched, and when he spoke again, his words came slowly, carefully, like he was handling broken glass. I was 20. My father was grooming me to take over the pack eventually, but I was young, arrogant. Thought I had years to figure out leadership. He stared into the fire, but I could tell he was seeing something else entirely. Blackridge Pack attacked at dawn. Set fire to the compound. My father died trying to evacuate the children. My mother fought until they overwhelmed her. My 2 younger brothers, his voice cracked. They were 15 and 12. My chest ached with recognition. With shared horror. And Sera, he continued, the name barely a whisper. My childhood mate. We'd bonded young, planned to have the ceremony that spring. They killed her first. Made sure I saw. His hands clenched into fists. I became Alpha because I was the only one left standing. I built this pack so I'd never be powerless again. So I'd never have to watch people I love die because I wasn't strong enough to protect them. They killed him in front of me, I heard myself say. Dragged him out of our home while I screamed. Held me down and made me watch while they tore out his throat. My voice shook, but I kept going because someone finally might understand. I was 2 months pregnant. Lost the pup that night. The healers said it was the trauma, the stress. My body just couldn't hold on to that piece of him. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, of recognition so profound it almost hurt. No platitudes. No empty reassurances that time would heal all wounds or that I'd find happiness again someday. Just the acknowledgement that we'd both been shattered and had somehow, impossibly, kept breathing anyway. You're the first person who doesn't look at me and see only the monster I became after, Ronan said finally, his storm gray eyes meeting mine. There was something raw in his gaze, something vulnerable he usually kept locked away. Everyone else sees the Alpha who burned down 3 Blackridge settlements in retaliation. Who executed every wolf involved without mercy. Who built a reputation on violence and control. You're the first person who doesn't treat my grief like an inconvenience, I replied softly. Like something to be managed or overcome on their schedule. The pack wanted me back to normal, whatever that means, within a month. As if losing your mate and child is something you just bounce back from. His hand moved toward mine where it rested on the chair arm. I watched his scarred fingers reach across the space between us, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin. My own hand lifted slightly, drawn by something I didn't fully understand. We both stopped. Pulled back. Too soon. Too dangerous. Too much history of loss between us to risk that kind of connection. But the almost touch lingered in the air like a promise. Or a warning. Stay, Ronan said, and this time it wasn't a command. It was a request, maybe even a plea. Help me understand how you survived what would have destroyed lesser wolves. How you kept going when everything that mattered was taken from you. Maybe I can learn from you. I looked at this Alpha who'd built himself into something unbreakable after being broken so completely. Who recognized my scars because they matched his own. Maybe, I whispered, we can learn from each other. Chapter 3. The Compound. The guest quarters were more spacious than my entire home had been in Silvercrest. Large windows overlooked the training grounds, and someone had left fresh clothes folded on the bed, practical things, not the decorative outfits the other candidates had worn. By the time I'd unpacked my meager belongings, word had spread through the compound. The other she-wolves were being sent home. Only I remained. Some days were bearable. I'd wake up and manage to dress myself, eat breakfast in the communal dining hall, even smile at passing pack members. Other days, the weight of everything pressed down so hard I could barely breathe, and I'd spend hours staring at nothing, trapped in memories I couldn't escape. Healing wasn't a straight line from broken to whole. It was a maze where you sometimes found yourself back at the beginning, lost all over again. Garrick Stonepaw found me on my third morning, as I was trying to find my way to the medical bay. The enforcer was massive, his scarred face set in permanent suspicion, and he studied me like I was a threat he hadn't yet identified. "The Alpha's taken an interest in you," he said without preamble. "I need to know if you're going to be a liability." "I'm not trying to be anything," I replied quietly. "I'm just trying to survive each day." His eyes narrowed. "Ronan doesn't need gentle. He needs strong. The pack needs a Luna who won't shatter under pressure." I should have cowered. Should have accepted his assessment. Instead, something in me sparked with defiance. Maybe what he needs is someone who understands that survival isn't the same as living. That strength includes knowing when to be soft. He snorted and walked away, but I caught the thoughtful look he threw over his shoulder. The medical bay became my refuge. As an Omega, I had natural healing abilities, nothing dramatic, but enough to ease pain, accelerate recovery, sense what was wrong beneath the surface. The pack's healer, an older wolf named Mira, welcomed my help without question. Warriors came through with training injuries, border patrol wounds, the everyday damage that came from maintaining a territory. I lost myself in the work. Stitching cuts, setting bones, mixing poultices from herbs whose names I'd learned as a child. My hands were steady here, purposeful. One young warrior with a dislocated shoulder gritted his teeth while I popped it back into place, then looked at me with something like respect. "Thank you, miss. That's the third time this month, and you barely made it hurt at all." "You need to strengthen the surrounding muscles," I told him, wrapping the joint carefully. "And stop showing off during sparring. I can tell you're overextending." Word spread quickly. The quiet Omega who'd stayed behind had skill, competence, a gentle touch that eased more than just physical pain. I didn't realize Ronan had been watching until Mira mentioned it casually one afternoon. "The Alpha's been by twice today. Just observing from the doorway. I think he's trying to figure you out." My hands faltered on the bandage I was tying. "What do you mean?" She smiled knowingly. "You're not performing for him. You're not trying to prove you're strong enough or worthy enough. You're just serving. Actually caring. I don't think he knows what to make of it." The private dinners started that week. Not formal affairs, just the two of us in his study, sharing meals while the fire crackled and the weight of leadership temporarily lifted from his shoulders. We talked about loss, about the impossible task of surviving when part of you died with the people you loved. About the expectations that crushed from all sides, his to be an unbreakable alpha, mine to somehow stop grieving on everyone else's schedule. "They want me to be the weapon they need," Ronan said one evening, staring into his glass. "Sometimes I forget I'm supposed to be more than that." "You are more than that," I replied. "You're just scared to show it." He looked at me then, really looked, and something passed between us that felt dangerous in its intimacy. It happened during dinner 4 days later. A door slammed somewhere in the compound, hard, violent, echoing through the stone halls. The sound cracked through my fragile peace like lightning, and suddenly I wasn't in Ronan's study anymore. I was in my old home, hearing them break down the door, hearing my mate's shout of warning cut short. "Lyra." Ronan's voice came from somewhere distant. "Lyra, you're safe. You're here. With me." But I couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the roaring in my ears and the phantom feeling of hands holding me down while they made me watch, made me witness. The lights dimmed. Not suddenly, but gradually, the harsh brightness fading to something softer. The temperature seemed to drop slightly, the air moving as if someone had opened a window. And Ronan's voice, steady and low and completely without command. "What do you need?" Not "let me fix this." Not "you're being irrational." Just, "what do you need?" "Space," I gasped. I can't." He moved back immediately, giving me room to breathe, to remember where I was. His presence remained steady but distant, an anchor without being a cage. "You're in the Stormveil compound," he said quietly. "It's just us. No one's going to hurt you here. I won't let them." Slowly, painfully, I clawed my way back to the present. My hands were shaking, my face wet with tears I didn't remember shedding. Ronan stayed exactly where he was, patient, waiting for me to indicate what I needed next. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Don't." His voice was fierce, but gentle. "Never apologize for surviving trauma." Outside the study door, I didn't see Garrick pull back from where he'd been about to knock, his expression shifting from suspicion to something that looked almost like respect. The whisper started that night, rippling through the pack like wildfire. The Alpha dimmed the lights for her. Did you see how careful he was? He's never been that gentle with anyone. By morning, the council had demanded a formal Luna assessment. And despite everything, I found myself hoping I wouldn't fail. Chapter 4. The Council Trial. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. High ceilings, dark wood panels, a long table where 7 of the pack's most powerful members sat in judgment. I stood at the far end, feeling every bit as small and insignificant as they clearly believed me to be. Ronan sat at the head of the table, his expression carved from stone, giving nothing away. Counselor Darius spoke first, his weathered face set in disapproval. With all due respect, Alpha, we must question this choice. An Omega from outside our pack, with no connections, no lineage of note. He paused, and I felt the next words coming like a blade. A traumatized Omega. Damaged goods, if we're being honest. How can someone so broken possibly lead beside you? The words landed like physical blows, each one finding the soft, vulnerable places I'd tried so hard to protect. Damaged goods. As if I was a thing that had been used up, discarded, worthless now that I'd been touched by tragedy. Counselor Helena leaned forward, her sharp eyes assessing. We understand you've suffered loss, girl. But a Luna must be strong, stable. You had a panic attack in the Alpha study just days ago. What happens when you freeze during a crisis? When the pack needs leadership and you're trapped in your own trauma? I wanted to argue. Wanted to defend myself. But the horrible truth was that part of me agreed with them. I was broken. I did wake up screaming most nights. I couldn't guarantee I wouldn't shatter under pressure because I'd already been shattered, and the pieces didn't fit back together the way they used to. My silence must have been damning because another counselor, Marcus, shook his head slowly. She doesn't even defend herself. How is she supposed to stand beside an Alpha who faces threats daily? Ronan's hands clenched on the table, and I saw the rage building in him like a storm about to break. He opened his mouth, no doubt to tear into them with all the lethal authority he commanded, but something in me snapped first. Stop. My voice cut through the chamber, surprising myself as much as them. I looked at Ronan, shaking my head slightly. Not like this. Let me fight my own battles. He subsided, though tension radiated from every line of his body. I turned back to the council, and for the first time since entering the room, I lifted my chin and met their judgmental stares head-on. You're right, I said, and watched their eyebrows rise in surprise. I am broken. My mate was murdered in front of me. I lost my pup. I wake up every night from nightmares where I'm back in that room, watching him die, feeling our child slip away. Some days I can barely function. Some days the weight of it makes me want to stop breathing. Darius opened his mouth, probably to agree with my assessment of my own inadequacy, but I kept going. But broken doesn't mean useless. My voice grew stronger, fueled by 8 months of being dismissed, overlooked, told to just move on. I've survived what would have killed others. I'm still standing when I should be dead or mad or completely destroyed. And you know what that's taught me? I understand pain. I know what it's like to bleed, to break, to lose everything and somehow have to keep going anyway. I looked at each council member in turn. Maybe that's exactly what this pack needs. Not a Luna who's never known suffering, who can't understand what it costs to survive. But someone who knows what it's like to be at the bottom, who can reach the broken ones you'd write off as damaged goods and help them heal. Because I guarantee you have wolves in this pack who are suffering in silence, who think their trauma makes them worthless. The council chamber had gone completely silent. I may not be the strongest candidate, I continued, my voice steady now. But I'm the one who won't give up on the wolves everyone else has stopped believing in. And if that's not what you want in a Luna, then I'm not the right choice. But don't dismiss me because I've bled. Some of us learn our greatest strengths from our deepest wounds. The silence stretched. Then Garrick, who'd been observing from his position by the door, stepped forward. She's tougher than any of us gave her credit for, he said gruffly. Takes more strength to stand there and own your scars than to pretend they don't exist. The Alpha knows what he's doing. Darius exchanged looks with the other council members. Finally, reluctantly, he nodded. A trial period. 3 months. We assess at the end whether she's truly Luna material. It wasn't acceptance. But it was a chance. The moment the council dismissed us, Ronan caught my wrist and pulled me into a private office off the main corridor. The door had barely closed before his hands were framing my face, his storm gray eyes blazing with something that made my breath catch. He started, then seemed to run out of words. Instead, he leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, to say no. When I didn't move, when I found myself leaning into him instead, his lips met mine with a desperation that spoke of years of isolation, of never letting anyone close enough to matter. The kiss was claiming, possessive, everything an alpha's kiss should be. But underneath that, there was something else, a question, a request for permission even as he took. His hands were gentle despite their strength, holding me like I was something precious he was terrified of breaking. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I've never wanted to protect someone as much as I want to protect you," he said roughly. "It terrifies me because I know what it costs to lose someone you." He stopped abruptly, the unspoken word hanging between us like a confession he wasn't ready to make. Love, I thought. He was going to say love. And the terrifying thing was that I understood completely. Because somewhere in the past few weeks, between shared dinners and quiet understanding and moments of recognition, I'd started falling for him too. This broken alpha who saw my scars and didn't flinch. Who understood that survival wasn't the same as living, and that maybe, just maybe, we could learn to do both. We were both falling. And we were both terrified of what would happen when we hit the ground. Chapter 5. The Eastern Borders. The rogue sightings along the eastern border had been increasing for days, lone wolves testing the boundaries, watching from the tree line. Ronan called a patrol meeting at dawn, and I arrived at the compound's main hall to find him already issuing orders to a group of his best warriors. "We leave within the hour," he was saying. "Standard formation, weapons ready." These rogues are organized, which means he stopped mid-sentence when he saw me standing at the edge of the group, wearing the practical traveling clothes I'd borrowed from the pack stores. After dismissing the others, he crossed to me with that predatory grace that never quite left him. "You're not coming." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an alpha command wrapped in protective instinct. And something in me bristled at the assumption that I needed to be sheltered, kept safe, protected from the realities of pack life. "Yes, I am," I said calmly. His jaw tightened. "Lyra, this isn't a discussion. There could be violence. You've already been through." "You can't wrap me in cotton wool," I interrupted, my voice firm despite the flutter of anxiety in my chest. "I'm not fragile. I won't break just from seeing danger." "I'm not saying you're fragile." His voice dropped, raw with an emotion that made my heart clench. "I'm saying I can't lose you." The confession hung between us, honest and terrifying. I stepped closer, looking up into those storm-gray eyes that held so much fear beneath the surface. "Then trust me," I said softly. "Trust me to be strong enough to stand beside you, not hide behind you. I survived the worst thing I could imagine. I can handle this." The internal war played out across his face, alpha instinct warring with respect for my autonomy. Finally, he exhaled roughly. "Garrick stays with you. Always. If I give the order to retreat, you don't argue." It was compromise, not capitulation. Agreed. The journey to the eastern border took most of the day. We traveled through dense forest, and Ronan fell into step beside me, pointing out landmarks, sharing stories about the territory's history. He talked about the early days after the massacre, how he'd built the Stormveil pack from nothing, drawing in displaced wolves and rogues who needed belonging. "Leadership isn't what I thought it would be," he admitted as we followed a game trail deeper into the woods. "I thought if I was strong enough, ruthless enough, I could protect everyone. But strength can't prevent every loss. Can't control every outcome. So what do you do?" I asked. "Keep trying. Keep fighting. Hope it's enough." He looked at me sidelong. Until recently, that was all I had. Duty without joy. Purpose without connection. We made camp by a river as dusk fell, the water rushing over smooth stones in a rhythm that should have been soothing. I watched Ronan move through the camp, checking perimeters, speaking with the sentries, always the alpha, always on duty. When he finally settled by the fire, I sat beside him and asked quietly, "Do you ever just let yourself rest? Stop being the alpha for even a moment?" He stared into the flames. "I'm not sure I remember how." "Show me your wolf," I said impulsively. "Not the alpha enforcing borders. Just you." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, then a hunger that had nothing to do with violence. We moved away from camp, into a clearing where moonlight filtered through the trees. I shifted first, my smaller silver wolf emerging with an ease born of practice. Ronan's shift was powerful, controlled, and his wolf was magnificent, massive and dark, built for dominance and strength. But when those storm gray eyes met mine in wolf form, I saw something softer. Something that had been locked away for too long. We ran. Not patrolling, not hunting, just running for the pure joy of movement, of being alive, of letting go. His larger form easily kept pace with mine, and when I darted playfully around a tree, he followed, and for a moment we were just two wolves playing in the moonlight. The scent of blood hit us simultaneously. We shifted back, hastily pulling on clothes, and found them in a hollow between two massive oaks, 3 wolves, badly wounded, wearing the unmistakable scent markers of Blackridge Pack. Ronan's entire body went rigid. I felt the rage rolling off him in waves, saw his hands clench into fists. These were the wolves who'd killed his family. Who'd murdered my mate. Every instinct in him screamed for vengeance. No! My voice cut through his fury. I stepped between him and the injured rogues, my hands raised. I won't let them make me into someone who kills without mercy. That's what they did. That's what made them monsters. Lyra, they deserve justice, I interrupted. Not vengeance. There's a difference. I knelt beside the nearest rogue, whose eyes were wide with terror, and began assessing his wounds with steady healer's hands. We treat them. We turn them over to proper authorities. We don't become what we hate. I felt Ronan watching me as I worked, binding wounds, staunching bleeding, offering water to wolves who destroyed everything I loved. My hands shook and tears blurred my vision, but I kept going. Because this was the choice that mattered, the one that determined who I'd become after the trauma, not who I'd been before it. When I'd finished, when the rogues were stable enough for transport, Ronan pulled me aside. His voice was rough with something that sounded like awe. You're stronger than I'll ever be. I would have torn them apart. Strength isn't always about what you're capable of destroying, I said quietly. Sometimes it's about what you choose not to. Later, as we secured the prisoners for the journey back, Garrick approached Ronan. I wasn't meant to hear, but wolf hearing was sharp, and his words carried. She doesn't make you weak, the enforcer said, watching me with a respect that hadn't been there before. She makes you better. There's a difference. Chapter 6, The Confession. We returned to the compound as heroes, the patrol that had captured Blackridge rogues without bloodshed, proof that Stormveil Pack valued justice over vengeance. But as the celebration died down and Pack members retreated to their quarters, Ronan found me on the compound's eastern wall, staring up at the stars. Walk with me, he said quietly. We left the compound behind, following a trail that led to a hilltop overlooking the territory. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky like scattered diamonds. Far enough from the Pack that we could finally breathe, finally stop performing the roles everyone expected of us. Her name was Sera. Ronan's voice broke the silence, raw and hesitant. My childhood mate. We grew up together, bonded when we were 17. Young and stupid and so certain we had forever. He sat on a large boulder, and I settled beside him, close enough to share warmth, but not touching. They killed her first. Made me watch, just like what happened to you. Wanted me to see her die before they burned everything else. My chest ached with recognition, with the horrible intimacy of shared trauma. I'm so sorry. I thought I'd never feel anything again, he continued. Spent 5 years building walls, becoming something harder, colder. Something that couldn't be hurt because it couldn't feel. He turned to look at me, and in the moonlight his eyes were luminous with unshed tears. Then you stood in that gathering hall and said, not anymore, and something in me just broke open. Like a dam I'd spent years building suddenly couldn't hold anymore. I understood that breaking. Felt it in myself every time he looked at me with something more than protective instinct, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Sometimes I feel guilty for being alive, I confessed, the words I'd never spoken aloud tumbling out in the darkness, where it felt safer to be vulnerable. For starting to heal. For wanting things again, wanting to laugh, to enjoy a meal, to feel something other than grief. My voice cracked. Like I'm betraying his memory by wanting to be happy again. Like moving forward means leaving him behind. Ronan's hand found mine, his calloused fingers intertwining with my smaller ones. Your mate would want you to live, he said fiercely. My family would want me to live. Surviving isn't betrayal, it's honoring them by refusing to let the monsters win. By choosing to be more than what trauma tried to make us. Is that what we're doing? I asked softly. Choosing. I think so. He shifted closer, his free hand coming up to cut my face with a tenderness that made my breath catch. I'm falling in love with you, Lyra. And it's terrifying because I know exactly what it costs to love someone. Know what it feels like to have that ripped away. But not loving you. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, catching a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Not loving you would cost more. Would mean they won. Would mean I spent the rest of my life alive but never actually living. The confession shattered something in me, the last wall I'd been hiding behind, the final defense against feeling too much, risking too much. Tears spilled freely now, and I didn't try to stop them. I'm falling in love with you too, I whispered. And I'm scared. Terrified, actually. Because I know what it's like to lose everything. To have happiness torn away so violently that you're not sure you'll ever feel safe again. I leaned into his touch, letting myself have this moment despite the fear. But I'm tired of letting fear decide my life. Tired of just surviving when I could be living. So, what do we do? He asked, and there was something almost boyish in the question, vulnerability from an alpha who controlled everything except this. We try, I said simply. We choose this, choose each other, knowing it might hurt. Knowing we might lose everything again. But we try anyway because the alternative is dying slowly from loneliness while we're still breathing. His kiss was different this time, not desperate or claiming, but tender, reverent, a promise sealed with lips and breath and hope. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. Whatever happens next, he said quietly, we face it together. No more hiding. No more running. Together, I agreed. We returned to the compound in the early hours, and when Ronan hesitated outside my quarters, I took his hand and pulled him inside. Not for passion, neither of us was ready for that, but for comfort, for the simple human need to not be alone. We lay together on top of the covers, fully clothed, his arms wrapped around me while I rested my head on his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear, grounding me. I woke sometime before dawn to find him thrashing, caught in the grip of a nightmare. Sera, he gasped. No, please. Ronan. I touched his face gently, the way he'd learned to do with me. Wake up. You're safe. I'm here. His eyes snapped open, wild and disoriented, then focused on me. His breathing slowed gradually as reality reasserted itself. I'm sorry, he whispered. Don't be. I stroked his hair back from his forehead. We're both still healing. That's okay. When I woke again later, it was from my own nightmare, hands holding me down, my mate's dying screams, and Ronan was there immediately, creating space, dimming the lantern, asking what I needed. We soothed each other through the dark hours, two broken people learning that healing didn't mean the pain disappeared. It meant having someone beside you who understood when it surfaced, who didn't flinch from your scars. As dawn broke through the window, painting everything gold, I realized this was what choosing looked like. Not perfect, not painless, but real. Together. Chapter 7. The Attack. 2 weeks of tentative hope had made me soft. I'd stopped flinching at loud noises, started sleeping through most nights, even caught myself humming while mixing poultices in the medical bay. Mira had smiled knowingly that morning, commenting that I looked lighter, like some of the weight I'd been carrying had finally eased. I was reorganizing the herb stores when the alarm bells shattered the afternoon calm. The sound was primal, urgent, 3 sharp clangs that meant one thing: the compound was under attack. Warriors poured from the training grounds, and through the medical bay windows I saw them, at least 20 wolves in Blackridge colors, flooding through a breach in the eastern wall. My hands froze on the jar of willow bark. The world tilted sideways, and suddenly I wasn't in the medical bay anymore. I was in my old home, hearing them break down the door, hearing my mate shout my name. Luna. Garrick's voice cut through the flashback. He burst into the bay, already halfway shifted, his eyes wild. We need to get you to the safe room. Now. But I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The jar slipped from my nerveless fingers and shattered on the floor, and all I could hear was the screaming. Then, now, always. The door exploded inward. 3 Blackridge wolves, and the one in front grinned when he saw me, recognition lighting his cruel eyes. Well, The little Omega who got away. He prowled closer, and I knew that face, knew it from my nightmares. He'd been there. He'd held me down while they murdered my mate. We should have finished you the first time. Garrick moved between us, fully shifted now, snarling defiance. But they were 3-1, and I was useless, paralyzed, trapped in my own terror while he fought to protect me. Then Ronan's roar shook the very foundations of the compound. He came through the doorway like vengeance incarnate, already shifted, his massive dark wolf a blur of lethal grace and absolute fury. You dare threaten what's mine? The battle was brutal. Ronan moved with precision born of years of combat, but Blackridge had sent their best, and more wolves kept flooding the compound. I watched from my frozen position as he tore through enemies, protecting me with every breath, every movement calculated to keep their attention on him instead of me. Too many. There were too many, and even an alpha had limits. I saw the moment exhaustion began to slow him, saw blood matting his dark fur from a dozen wounds. Then I saw the wolf behind him, creeping closer while Ronan faced 3 others, jaws open wide, going for the killing strike. Something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped into place, like a bone that had been dislocated finally sliding back where it belonged. The paralysis shattered, and in its place came crystal clear purpose. I shifted. For the first time since the night they'd murdered my mate, I let my wolf emerge. Smaller, silver, but fast and furious with 8 months of suppressed rage and the absolute certainty that I could not lose someone else I loved. My teeth found the attacker's throat before he could reach Ronan. The taste of blood was copper and hot, and part of me recoiled, but the larger part refused to let go until the threat was neutralized. He fell, and I spun to face the others, a snarl ripping from my chest that I'd never known I was capable of. Ronan's head whipped around, shock and fierce pride blazing in those storm-gray eyes. But one of the Blackridge wolves had gotten through his guard, claws raking deep across his shoulder. He staggered, and terror gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. I was beside him in an instant, fighting despite every instinct that screamed to freeze, to hide, to surrender to the trauma. But Ronan was bleeding, was wounded because he'd been protecting me, and I'd be damned if I let him fall. Our eyes met across the chaos. His wolf, my wolf, both battered and bleeding, but still standing. And then I felt it, a pulse so profound it was like gravity reversing, like every cell in my body recognizing its other half. The bond snapped into place with the force of a thunderclap. Mate. The word echoed through every fiber of my being. Mine. Ours. Power surged through the connection, his strength flowing into me, my healing energy pouring into him. The wounds on his shoulder began to close, faster than any natural healing. My own exhaustion evaporated, replaced by a vitality that felt limitless, unstoppable. Together, we moved as one. His power, my speed. His dominance, my compassion. 2 halves of a whole that had been waiting lifetimes to connect. The remaining Blackridge wolves didn't stand a chance against the combined force of true mates fighting in perfect synchronicity. When the last enemy fell, when silence finally descended on the blood-soaked medical bay, I shifted back to human form and collapsed beside Ronan as he did the same. His shoulder was still bleeding despite the bond's healing, deep gashes that would scar. My hands moved automatically, pressing against the wounds, my healer's training and the new bond working together to knit flesh and stop bleeding. He caught my wrist, his grip weak but insistent. You came back to me, he said, his voice rough with emotion and exhaustion. You fought. Tears streamed down my face, relief, terror, joy, all tangled together until I couldn't separate them. I'll always fight for you, I whispered fiercely. For us. I'm done running from fear. Done letting it control me. His other hand came up to cut my face, and through the bond one felt everything, his love, his pride, his overwhelming relief that we'd both survived. Mate, he breathed, and the word was reverence, was promise, was home. Mate, I agreed, and kissed him despite the blood and chaos around us, sealing the bond that fate and choice had woven together. We'd both been broken. Both been destroyed by loss. But somehow, impossibly, we'd found each other in the wreckage. And together, we were learning that broken pieces could form something even stronger than what came before. Chapter 8. The Bonding Ceremony. The compound bore the scars of battle, scorched walls, bloodstains on stone, the acrid smell of smoke still hanging in the air 3 days later. We'd won, but victory came with a price. 5 pack members dead, dozens wounded, and both Ronan and I carried new marks that would never fully fade. The claw wounds on his shoulder had healed to angry red lines. I had bruises mottling my ribs and a gash across my forearm where I'd blocked a strike meant for my throat. But we were alive. Together. And that was enough. "I'm not waiting," Ronan declared on the 4th morning, finding me in the medical bay where I was checking on the wounded. His storm-gray eyes were fierce with determination. "We bond now. Officially. I've wasted enough of my life afraid to live." My hands stilled on the bandage I was wrapping. "Ronan, the compound is barely repaired. Half the pack is still recovering. Which is exactly why we need this." He crossed to me, taking my hands in his. "They need to see that life continues. That love survives even after violence. That we're not just existing anymore, we're living." The ceremony was planned for that evening, and as the hours ticked closer, anxiety coiled tighter in my chest. A public bonding meant the entire pack watching, witnessing, judging. What if I froze? What if the trauma surfaced at the worst possible moment? I found Garrick overseeing repairs to the eastern wall. The enforcer had become an unexpected friend, his gruff exterior hiding a surprising capacity for understanding. "What if I break down?" I asked quietly, standing beside him. "What if I'm not strong enough to get through the ceremony without falling apart?" He set down the timber he'd been examining and turned to face me fully. "Strength isn't never breaking," he said, his scarred face softening. "It's breaking and choosing to stand back up. You've done that more times than anyone I know. One more ceremony isn't going to defeat you. But what if? Then you break," he interrupted gently. "And your mate catches you. And the pack sees that even their Luna is allowed to be human. Might do some of them good to witness that." The sacred grove was ancient, tucked into the heart of Stormveil territory where massive oaks formed a natural cathedral. As sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, the pack gathered over 200 wolves, many still bearing bandages and healing wounds, all of them silent with anticipation. I wore a simple dress the color of moonlight, and when I entered the grove, Ronan was already there, standing beneath the oldest oak. He wore traditional bonding attire, dark leather and ceremonial markings, but it was his expression that made my breath catch, raw hope and fierce love and gratitude that we'd both survived to reach this moment. The full moon rose as we faced each other, hands clasped, while the pack elder began the ancient words. But when it came time for our vows, Ronan had insisted we write our own. His voice was steady, carrying to every corner of the grove. "I vow to protect you without caging you, to love you without controlling you, to honor your strength even when you can't see it yourself." His thumbs brushed across my knuckles. "I vow to be worthy of the trust you've given me, to create safety without demanding surrender, to remember that your healing is yours to control." Tears blurred my vision, but my voice remained clear. "I vow to trust you with my broken pieces, to remind you that caring isn't weakness, to stand beside you in power and in vulnerability." I squeezed his hands. "I vow to choose you every day, to face my fears instead of letting them cage me, to build a life with you that honors both what we've lost and what we've found." The elder pressed our joined hands together, speaking the final binding words. The bond that had snapped into place during battle now solidified, deepening, weaving through every cell until I couldn't tell where I ended and Ronan began. Healing energy flowed between us, not erasing our scars, but easing the pain they carried. Not forgetting our losses, but making space for joy alongside the grief. The pack's howl of recognition was deafening, dozens of voices lifted in acknowledgement that this was a true mate bond, forged not in convenience or politics, but in genuine understanding and choice. That night, in the privacy of our chambers, there was no urgency, no desperate claiming. Instead, there was tenderness, reverence, two people learning each other's bodies with the care of those who knew how precious and fragile life could be. Every touch was a promise. Every kiss was healing. When we finally came together, it was more than physical. It was spiritual reunion, two shattered souls finding wholeness in each other. Afterward, lying tangled together in moonlight, Ronan traced the scar on my forearm with gentle fingers. "I thought my capacity for love died with my family," he whispered. "Thought that part of me was gone forever. You brought me back to life, Lyra." I pressed my hand over his heart, feeling it beat strong and steady beneath my palm. "You taught me that surviving and living are different things," I replied. I'd been surviving for 8 months, just going through motions. But now I'm finally living again. When dawn broke, I woke to find Ronan already up, watching me with an expression of such contentment it made my chest ache. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "That you're going to change everything," he said. "I can see it already, you have plans." He was right. As we dressed and prepared to face the day, I told him about the ideas that had been forming. Trauma support groups for pack members who'd survived violence. Training for warriors on recognizing PTSD. A system where Omegas weren't just servants, but valued healers and counselors. The pack needs to understand that strength includes acknowledging pain, I said. That broken doesn't mean useless. Ronan pulled me close, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Then we'll build it. Together. Whatever you need, whatever vision you have, I'll support it completely." And I believed him. Because we'd both learned that true strength wasn't standing alone. It was choosing to stand together. Chapter 9. The Legacy. 6 months after the bonding ceremony, the Stormveil compound had transformed in ways both visible and subtle. The physical scars of battle had been repaired, but the deeper changes were what mattered most. In the great hall where I'd once stood terrified and broken, wolves now gathered twice weekly for trauma recovery groups, a space where survivors could share their stories without judgment, without timelines for healing. I led the sessions myself, along with Mira and 2 other healers we'd trained. Former rogues who'd lost their packs. Warriors carrying guilt from battles they'd survived when packmates hadn't. Omegas who'd endured abuse in their previous homes. They came hesitantly at first, suspicious that vulnerability would be seen as weakness. But slowly, cautiously, they began to open up. "Healing isn't linear," I told them during one session, sharing my own journey. "Some days you'll feel strong. Other days the trauma will hit you like it just happened yesterday. Both are okay. Both are part of the process." The Omega Empowerment Program had been Garrick's idea, surprisingly. He'd approached me one morning with gruff determination. "Too many Omegas think they're helpless. Need to change that." Now he ran self-defense classes, specifically designed for wolves who'd been taught submission was their only value. "Every wolf deserves to feel safe and powerful," he'd bark during training, watching with approval as Omegas learned to fight, to defend, to claim space in the world. The pack members whispered about the changes, but not with disapproval. "Our alpha leads with strength and heart now," I'd overheard one warrior tell another. "Makes him better, not weaker." Ronan's transformation was visible to everyone. He still commanded absolute authority when necessary, still protected the pack with lethal efficiency. But now he also knew when to soften, when to listen, when to create space for vulnerability. The council meetings included discussions about mental health alongside territorial disputes. The training grounds incorporated recovery time and emotional check-ins. On a crisp autumn morning, Ronan and I made a journey we'd been planning for weeks. We traveled to the place where my mate was buried, a quiet grove in what had been Silvercrest territory. I knelt beside the simple stone marker, Ronan's hand steady on my shoulder. "I'm happy now," I told the grave quietly. "I hope that's okay. I hope you'd understand that surviving you didn't mean forgetting you. It just meant learning to live again." Tears fell, but they were gentler now, more bittersweet than agonizing. We visited Sera's grave next, in the compound's memorial garden where Ronan's family rested. He placed fresh flowers on each marker, his voice thick with emotion. "I found someone," he said to the stone bearing Sera's name. "Someone who understands. I think you'd like her." "We honor the past," I said softly, taking his hand while embracing the future. Both can be true at once. The future arrived sooner than expected. 2 weeks later, I confirmed what I'd suspected. I was pregnant. The news sent both of us spiraling through every emotion possible. Joy, terror, hope, and bone-deep fear all tangled together until neither of us could separate them. "I'm terrified something will happen to you," Ronan confessed late one night, his hand splayed protectively across my still flat belly. "I can't lose you. I can't lose this." I covered his hand with mine, understanding his fear because I carried the same one. "We can't control everything," I said gently. "Bad things might happen despite our best efforts. But we can choose to live fully despite the fear. Choose joy even knowing it could be taken away. Because the alternative is existing in constant terror, and that's no life at all." He pulled me close, and through the bond one felt his fear gradually ease, replaced by cautious hope. "You're right. We choose this. We choose life. 3 months into the pregnancy, when my body had adjusted and the healer confirmed everything was progressing well, we returned to the river where we'd first run together as wolves. The place where Ronan had let himself play instead of patrol, where we'd both remembered what it felt like to experience joy without duty weighing us down. We shifted together, our wolves emerging with practiced ease. His massive dark form and my smaller silver one so different, yet perfectly matched. We ran through the forest with abandon, chasing each other through sun-dappled clearings, splashing through the river's shallows, playing with the pure delight of being alive and together. When we finally collapsed in a clearing, shifting back to human form and tangled together in the grass, both of us were laughing breathlessly. "You saved me from a half-life of just surviving," I said, tracing the scar on his shoulder from the battle that had sealed our bond. "Taught me that I could be broken and still be worthy. Still be strong." "You saved me from becoming something I would have hated," he replied, his hand gentle on my face. "Something cold and isolated and defined only by violence. You reminded me that strength includes softness, that power means creating safety, not just dominating threats." Years later, I would stand in front of a group of young wolves, some orphaned by violence, others carrying trauma from abuse, all of them struggling with the weight of what they'd survived. My daughter played nearby, her laughter mixing with other pack children's as they chased each other through the compound gardens. Another pup was on the way, and the fear never fully disappeared, but joy had learned to coexist with it. "You are not what happened to you," I told the young wolves gently. "You are what you choose to become after. The trauma is part of your story, but it doesn't have to be the whole story. And choosing to heal, to trust, to love again despite knowing what it costs, that's the bravest thing any wolf can do." One young Omega raised her hand hesitantly. "But what if we break? What if we're too damaged?" I smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought me here. "Then you break. And you let people who care about you help pick up the pieces. And you keep going anyway. Because broken doesn't mean finished. It just means you've survived something hard, and survival is its own kind of strength." The Stormveil pack flourished under our leadership, not because we pretended weakness didn't exist, but because we'd built a culture that knew how to heal it. Former rogues found belonging. Abuse survivors found safety. Traumatized wolves found understanding. We were strong not despite our scars, but because we learned what to do with them. Ronan found me after the session, pulling me close and resting his hand on my swollen belly where our second pup kicked vigorously. "You're changing the world," he murmured against my hair. "We're changing it," I corrected. "Together." And that was our legacy. Not domination or conquest or building walls to keep pain out, but creating a world where the broken could become whole again. Where strength meant knowing when to fight and when to heal. Where true power wasn't about control, but about creating space for everyone, even the damaged, the traumatized, the overlooked, to find their way home. We'd both been shattered by loss. But from those shattered pieces, we'd built something beautiful. Something lasting. Something that proved love could survive even the darkest nights, and that choosing hope despite fear was the most revolutionary act of all. If this story moved you, if Lyra and Ronan's journey stayed with you longer than you expected, then you're exactly where you're meant to be. There are many more stories like this waiting here. Stories of survival, strength, love after loss, and choosing to live again. Please subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Like this video if it resonated with you. Comment and tell us what moments stayed with you the most. And share this story with someone who might need it. Thank you for listening, for supporting the channel, and for being part of this journey. See you in the next story.